Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm the senior writer at slashfilm.com. I'm stepping in for Slash Film editor-in-chief Peter Sciretta, who normally hosts this show. He is actually out recording interviews with more Star Wars people, so that should be fun. We'll be hearing all about that on the site and presumably on the podcast, maybe, sometime in the very near future. But joining me on today's episode, we have Slash Film managing editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Slash Film writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
And Slash Film writer Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
On today's show, we're going to be talking about Morgan Spurlock's admission of sexual misconduct, Star Wars The Last Jedi's box office numbers, The Last Jedi has more practical creatures than any other Star Wars film, the future of X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Deadpool in the MCU, a book of Rian Johnson's behind-the-scenes photos of The Last Jedi is going to be released, and in our feature presentation, we're going to be talking about, you guessed it, The Last Jedi, and how it doesn't really care what you think about it. Let's just jump right into the water cooler segment before we dive into the news. So, Jacob, what have you been up to?
I've been watching Netflix's The Crown after I read Chris's review of Season 2 on the site, and my wife was a big fan and figured it was better than ever to give it a shot, and it's a really good show. It reminds me a lot of Mad Men in that each episode feels very complete, feels like a short story. Each episode is built around a single thematic idea and brings those characters around that idea. It's really refreshing to see on Netflix, a platform where most creators have chosen to make 13-hour-long movies as opposed to TV shows that actually have hooks and have beginnings and endings for episodes and actually make you want to come back. And it's been really refreshing to not binge it. I've been watching one episode at a time, letting the episode digest and really appreciating it, and really appreciating how the show, like BoJack Horseman, is the only other Netflix show that actually feel bingeable, which makes you not want to binge it. Have you guys watched The Crown other than Chris?
No, I have not yet. I've heard good things. HT, have you seen it?
I have not yet either. I've been planning to. I only know that it's the most expensive Netflix production yet, but I am interested in it.
Yeah.
I guess I should say, for those of you at home, it's a series about the reign of Queen Elizabeth II from the 1950s through modern day. And right now, Season 2, I believe, is in the 60s, where Season 1 is the 50s. And Chris, you've seen all of it so far. I mean, I'm so far behind you. How do you feel about the show after Season 2?
I really like it. I liked Season 2 more than Season 1, actually. I might be in the minority there. I've heard some people say they prefer the first one. But like you said, what I really like about it is that it's a very episodic show, which is surprisingly hard to come by now, where everything is sort of just blends together. And I like that the show takes its time to have each episode sort of stand on its own.
And Chris, what have you been up to?
I just finished a book. I wrote an article about it for slashfilm.com. The book is by Matt Zoller-Seitz and Simon Abrams. It's about Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone, and it's a really cool book. It goes into the entire production of the film. It's basically like a book-length interview with del Toro, where he talks about every element of the film, of the production, like cinematography, the music, all that stuff. But he also talks about just film in general. And if you've ever listened to one of his commentary tracks on one of his Blu-rays, he's one of the most knowledgeable filmmakers working today. He just knows pretty much everything there is to know about movies. So it's just fascinating to read and like see him just talk about films and other filmmakers and filmmaking in general. So I highlighted like 13 sort of elements from the book that you can read, but that only scratches the surface. So I highly recommend you just go out and get the book. And the book is just called The Devil's Backbone, like the film.
Nice. So for me, I am preparing to head back to Florida for a week before Christmas. So I don't really have much to add in the water cooler segment, but HT, I know that you have something to talk about regarding The Last Jedi, right?
Yeah, so I've been complaining for the past couple episodes about not getting to see The Last Jedi early, but I did get to see it on opening night at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., which was a pretty cool experience. So not only was it, very space-themed, but they also had a couple exhibits set up in anticipation of the movie screening. So they had like this big interactive screen that showed all the characters from the Star Wars franchise, in which you could kind of press on random parts of the screen to like look up more information. So that was really cool. And then they had two costumes that were allegedly worn in the movie from Daisy Ridley's Rey costume and Mark Hamill's Luke costume. So those were on display, and they also gave us free swag in the form of a poster and some collectible postcards. So it was a good time, and it was an IMAX, so it was a big screen and everything. So I actually I was pretty happy with the choice to watch it that opening day and see it with a huge crowd of people who were just gasping and clapping like a bunch of nerds.
That's very cool. So we're going to be talking a lot more about The Last Jedi as this episode unfolds. But before we do that, let's go ahead and jump into some other news items. So Morgan Spurlock, the documentarian behind Super Size Me, has admitted a history of sexual misconduct. HT, what do we know about this?
So Morgan Spurlock on Wednesday published a post on Twitter in which he stated that he was part of the problem and that he had two previous cases or two previous accusations in which two separate women had accused him of rape and sexual harassment. And he went into detail about these two incidents and apologized. And a day later, he stepped down from his company, Warrior Poets, which is a production company he founded based in New York. So in this long Twitter confession that he made, he spoke about how in college he was accused of rape by a female student there when he was there, and the second one was sexual harassment, which happened 8 years ago with a former female employee who he would verbally harass, call her hot pants and sexy pants, and she after she quit, she threatened to tell everyone that he would constantly call her that, so he paid her to sort of like keep quiet about it. And there's been a lot of more cases and sort of people being revealed to be active and frequent sexual harassers and assaulters in Hollywood. So now Morgan Spurlock is kind of preemptively coming out as being one of the men who's part of the problem, as he says in his post. And he says he's actively seeking help for like these accusations and like sort of these incidences. So it seems like he's trying to get some sort of, make some sort of amends for his actions, which is, I think, a step in the right direction in how people should come forward with these kinds of claims and incidences.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, I'll probably say the same thing you were about to. I'm just wondering if the fact that he brought up and brought it out there is a good sign. Not necessarily a good sign, not the kind of thing that makes you want to forgive him, but the kind of thing that's a sign of men taking stock of their lives, even maybe thinking back to the things that they did in the past that they didn't realize were troublesome. Is this like any kind of step in the right direction, or is the guy covering his butt? I'm really curious what everybody here thinks.
I think it's a combination of both, because he was talking in his post about how all these accusations came out, and he kind of thought, oh, I might be next, and he decided to preempt that and come out with this statement talking about it. But he does seem like he's sort of taking action for making amends for his actions. So I do hope that the sort of Harvey Weinstein effect will cause people to look back at their previous actions and see how they may have hurt people in the process. So it's obvious that Morgan Spurlock is not in denial here. He obviously knows he was wrong in these actions that he made, but it could be a good step in the right direction, I think.
Chris, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is like a combination of just doing the right thing and covering his own ass. Really, it's very strange because it just sort of came out of nowhere, and I don't know, but yeah, I think it really is just a combination of those two things.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Morgan Spurlock has another documentary that's supposed to be playing at this year's Sundance Film Festival, or I guess next year's technically. It's like the Sundance is next month. So I wonder if he's going to show up for that, if it's, if this is something where he's going to, he's stepping down from his production company. Does that mean that he's sort of putting all of his filmmaking and all of those endeavors on hold as he sort of learns to listen and all of that kind of stuff? Or is this something where it's just going to be like a temporary thing? I don't know. I guess we'll see when we get to Sundance. We'll see if we see him wandering around Park City. But I guess
that's especially hard because he's like the star of his movies, not like a behind-the-scenes documentarian. He puts himself front and center.
Yeah. So yeah, that'll be fascinating to see what happens and if there's any more fallout than what he's brought down on himself, I guess. I guess moving on, Chris, what do we know about the future of the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Deadpool in terms of the MCU? I think we talked about the Fox and Disney deal a lot on the podcast yesterday, but what's the latest on this?
Right. So yeah, the big Fox Disney deal finally happened, and there's a lot of moving parts, but all anyone online seems to care about is superheroes. So Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, confirmed on a call to investors. Basically, he said that it is official that X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Deadpool will all be part of the MCU. So if you were really hoping for that, you just got your wish, and that's definitely going to happen sometime in the near future.
Yeah, so that's Bob Iger. That's straight from Bob Iger's mouth. So I mean, I think at this point the nail has definitely been driven home. Like I don't imagine that there's going to be any further confusion over whether or not those characters are involved, because I know that we talked a little bit about the Fantastic Four and sort of confusing rights issues with that particular sub property, if you will. So it sounds like these guys are definitely going to be coming to the MCU. And Jacob, I think you even predicted that we're going to be seeing the X-Men in 2020. Was that your guess?
Yeah, that was I jokingly guessed 2020 for X-Men. That feels right. But I also want to add I feel like every piece of like superhero news about the Disney Fox deal should be accompanied by some downbeat news to remind people this sucks.
Yeah.
And that is Deadline's reporting that 5,000 to 10,000 people could lose their jobs when this deal is over. So hooray for X-Men and the MCU, guys.
Yeah.
And hooray for 10,000 people without jobs.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a bummer. Yeah, I mean, I hope that people understand the enormity of this deal beyond just the superhero scope, as Chris mentioned. It's pretty serious, and a lot of lives, a lot of livelihoods, I guess, are hanging in the balance. So we'll see how that continues to play out here in the next few months. And I think there still needs to be like some regulatory oversight and approvals before that deal officially goes through. Is that right? But for the most part, it's sort of done. Does anyone know about that?
I don't think it's going to take full effect till 2019. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I could have swore I read that that's when we'll
2018,
finally.
I think. Yeah. So it's going to be it's been finalized, but like the actual effects won't take place until next year.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess moving from sort of bleak news to something a little bit more lighthearted, and that is Star Wars: The Last Jedi and its box office prospects. So this movie opened last night, and it earned $45 million domestically in its Thursday night preview screenings, which makes it the second biggest Thursday opening of all time, right behind, wait for it, Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So that seems to be a pattern with this movie in terms of box office anyway. The analysts all predict that this movie is going to or could earn as much as $100 million on its opening day. That also would put it right behind The Force Awakens. And yeah, just in general, the movie is not supposed to be, performing as well. It's not tracking to perform as well as The Force Awakens, but it's already doing better than Rogue One, which I think only earned $29 million in its domestic previews. So
only.
I know. And all of this obviously is relative because we are talking about Star Wars, which is like the dominant movie franchise right now. So yeah, take all of this with the with the relative grain of salt that it deserves. But in terms of nationwide box office, they are looking at somewhere between 95 and 100 million for its opening day. And yeah, analysts are predicting that the movie might end up making as much as $425 million worldwide in its opening weekend. So that's pretty significant. We'll talk a little bit more about The Last Jedi, and actually let's keep that train rolling. And Chris, the movie, as we know now, has more practical creatures than any other Star Wars movie. What do we know about this exactly?
Yes, Peter interviewed Neil Scanlon, the creature designer of The Last Jedi, and he revealed there's over 180 to maybe 200 elements of practical creatures in the film, which is a lot, and it's very cool because when you think of modern blockbusters or even the Star Wars prequels, they tend to go over the top with CGI, and it's neat that Rian Johnson and company wanted to make this more practical. So I personally appreciate that because I hate shoddy CGI.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, that The Force Awakens only had something in the realm of like 100 creatures, so this seems like almost double that. And you can sort of feel it in the movie. I mean, I know we'll talk about the film in coming up in a little bit more detail, but you feel that it feels like there are real things, real actual practical elements in this movie. It has a real tactile nature to it.
Yeah, especially in the Canto bite scenes.
Jacob, did you say something?
Yeah, I talked over Chris like a jerk, but but I feel like Rian Johnson, if he comes from a very, very specific film fan background, he very much an old school kind of guy. He loves his practical effects. He loves his 80s stuff. He loves his tactical, practical things. And I feel like this is the first movie he's made where he gets a chance to make puppets and make robots, and he has the money to do it. And I feel like I can just imagine Rian Johnson being like, "Oh, I could do the CGI, but I have money now." Or something like J.J. Abrams, even though he also embraced practical. He's a digital guy. He knows how digital works. He's been around the blockbuster for a bit. Whereas I think that Rian Johnson's having a ball, and you can see that in the movie.
Yeah, it does seem like Rian Johnson's kind of like a kid in a sandbox, because we heard about how he built in excess of 100 sets for this movie, which apparently was too much for George Lucas, but it sounds like he's having fun making the film at least.
And it actually looks like he's having fun or had fun making the movie, because if you follow him on Instagram, you've probably seen a lot of the behind-the-scenes photos that he was taking. HT, now we know that a book of those photos is going to be released. Is that right?
Yeah, so he took a lot of photos from behind the scenes through his 35 millimeter camera, and he's shown some of those on his Instagram, like you said, and during his convention appearances. And apparently they will all be published in a book to be released sometime next year. We don't know the exact date for it, but it seems like a really cool way to just see the filming process, where everyone's having a lot of fun, and a great sort of in memoriam for Carrie Fisher as well, who is in a lot of these behind the scenes photos. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. The slashfilm.com article that we published that was interviewed with Rian Johnson shows a couple of the photos that he took, and they're really lovely.
Yeah, and we'll definitely link to that in the show notes. You can check it out. And in Peter's interview with him, Rian Johnson admits, he said, it's not even that they're great photos, it's just unique, and that's why I started doing it. I'm like the only person on set who's not going to get tackled if they take a picture of something sensitive, so I thought that was pretty funny. Do you guys think that, I mean, are you the type of movie watcher and memorabilia collectors, each of you, I want to hear from you, where if they actually do end up releasing this as a book, is that something that you would get as a coffee table book, or is that something that you would just like sort of browse through when you're wandering through a bookstore? HT.
I would probably buy it as a gift. I already have way too much stuff, so I don't know if I would buy it for myself. But I would probably browse through it. I liked seeing the photos, so I would be inclined to at least look through it.
Yeah, Chris, what about you?
I would definitely get this if it comes out. I'm on like a kick lately where I'm buying as many big coffee table art books about movies as I can. I actually just got the art book for The Last Jedi today, and it just has a lot of neat concept art in it. So I would definitely get this when it comes out.
Very cool. Jacob?
I own thousands and thousands of books, much to my detriment, so the answer is yes.
So I like how you have so much, but you're still willing to add to that collection. So
I'm trying to fill the gaping hole of my life, Ben, with Star Wars books.
All right, so let's get into it, guys. The feature presentation. Jacob, you wrote what I think is one of the best articles that I've read in a long, long time, and I know you're going to bristle with that, but I highly encourage everyone to read it. I'll link to it in the show notes here. It is called Star Wars The Last Jedi Doesn't Care What You Think About It, and That's Why It's Great. I want to use this as sort of a jumping off point for all of us to talk a little bit about our reactions to the film, and I guess the general reactions to it that we're seeing from audiences, and the divide that there is between audience reaction and critic reaction, I was really surprised to see that from a lot of the tweets that I've been seeing, on film Twitter this morning, that a lot of quote unquote regular audiences don't seem to be taking very well to this movie. I know we've been talking about it for basically all week. As soon as the embargo lifted, a lot of the reactions out of the world premiere were really positive. That's sort of to be expected. But then the normal review embargo lifted, and the film was the highest reviewed Star Wars movie on Rotten Tomatoes. So I was anticipating that audiences would love the movie, and it doesn't necessarily seem to be true across the board in the way that I had sort of anticipated. I'm interested in what you guys think about that. Chris, do you have any thoughts about the general response to The Last Jedi so far?
Yeah, I'm a little taken aback by it, honestly. I'm not a Star Wars fanatic. I like most of the movies. I really liked The Force Awakens. I loved this movie, but I guess I get why people are reacting this way, because the film is very it's not really interested in fan service. I mean, sequels by their nature are fan service, that's just the nature of sequels, but this film, it's very unconcerned with playing into audience expectations. Like almost every scene in this movie is sort of devoted to smashing any expectation or fan theory you might have had. So I guess people just weren't prepared for that, especially after Force Awakens, which, again, I love that movie, but that movie is very fan servicey. It's very concerned with living up to what everyone expected a new Star Wars film to be. And Last Jedi isn't interested in that. And that's what I think actually makes the movie strong, but I guess that's the minority opinion.
Yeah, HT, do you think that's the reason that general audiences aren't necessarily taking to this film in the way that we all thought that they would?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because Last Jedi is a movie that definitely bucks all expectations and almost actively disregards them. So I really love Last Jedi. I think that it was one of the most emotionally resonant Star Wars movies that I've seen. I've seen all of them, but it's interesting. It was very shocking to me that people had such strong reactions against it. I remember when I was watching it, I thought there were a couple of moments that didn't quite work, but not to the point that people would actively hate it like they are. So I wonder if it's the avid Star Wars fans who are really coming out against this film because, it doesn't exactly answer all the questions we have. It doesn't go into the involved detail that so much of the Star Wars universe is. Because the way that I see the Star Wars universe and Star Wars in general is as sort of like this mythological fantasy series, but instead of a very involved sci-fi series, which is what I think a lot of Star Wars fans today see it as. Mm-hmm. So I think that sort of dissonance between how this movie is presenting sort of a more like return to that fantasy mythology of the first movie versus just kind of the intricate sci-fi developments and kind of convoluted theories and subplots, that dissonance is something that I think is what's making people react so strongly against it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the puzzle blocks approach has sort of maybe conditioned audiences to attempt to get ahead of movies and try to sort of plug things in and sort of try to outsmart movies in a certain way. And as Chris mentioned, this movie is so not interested in. It's not even on the same playing field that the fans were on, or it's like you walk into it and from the very beginning you sort of are like, oh wow, this is not everybody always talks about how the movie is so different, and that's been like the big word, but I think you feel it pretty early on in the film that it's not even remotely interested in sort of holding your hand in any way. Jacob, I know that's like a centerpiece of this article that you wrote.
Yeah, you can read the whole article at slashfilm.com. It's in the show notes, and so I'm not going to run down the whole thing. It's way too long and way too sprawling, and people say it's good, so I'll take your word for it. But So what I want to do is I'm going to give a spoiler warning now because I think you guys have done a pretty good overview of the movie, and quite frankly, I'm not interested in talking about things that aren't spoilers at this point.
Right.
So let's consider this. Can we call a spoiler warning right now for anybody to turn this off?
So yeah. So if you guys haven't seen the movie yet, pause this. Come back to us. If subscribe to the show on iTunes, all of that stuff. Spread the word about the podcast. That would be great. And then for everybody else who has seen the film, stick around because we're going to talk about the movie in spoilers starting right now. Jacob, go ahead.
Luke dies. Yoda's there. Snoke dies. Okay, sorry if you stuck around. It's your fault, guys. What I find really fascinating about this is that J.J. Abrams left a lot of threads, open threads, for the next movie. He left a lot of lingering mysteries. He set up the next movie. He sort of said, okay, here's the path I'm placing you on. The next movie can pick up my path. And almost instantly, Rian Johnson burns that path to the ground and steers Star Wars through a fence on the side of the road off into the wilderness. It is an insane thing. Like, you expect Snoke to be the big deal, the big bad throughout the whole trilogy. Nope, he's dead at the halfway point, killed kind of unceremoniously in a really, actually funny way. You have Rey's parents being revealed to not be Kenobis or Skywalkers or Solos, but to be just some bad people who didn't care about her and sold her for money. It's Rian Johnson saying, like, okay, I was left this box. I was left this group of toys to play with. I'm going to put this box down, light it on fire, and go find toys that I'm interested in. And he starts using the lingering threads to explore things that he's passionate about. He starts, instead of presenting, like when Han Solo shows up in Force Awakens, like, oh, Han, look at Han, he's back to being Han. Isn't that great? Han Solo's fun. He's great. He's a scoundrel. That's great. But when we have Luke Skywalker here, and Luke Skywalker is the centerpiece of this movie, and Mark Hamill is magnificent, which I never thought I'd say as much as I like Mark Hamill. He's this broken shell who's gone into exile to die. He's bitter and he's angry and he's frustrated. And this is not a movie where Rey shows up and instills the old guy with hope. This is a movie where the bitter old guy teaches Rey a lesson of, oh, I can't rely on my heroes anymore. The old generation has failed. It's up to me now. And that's what Last Jedi is really about. It's not about one last victory tour for Luke Skywalker. It's about how the previous generation thought they won a war they failed and then can't rise to the occasion again. And it's up to not the Skywalkers, not the Solos, but the ordinary people who are caught up in the wake of this nightmare have to rise up and resist a new fascist regime. And that is so powerful and so different. And whereas J.J. Abrams wanted to make a blanket, he made a cuddly comfort food movie that I enjoy very much. It is a delicious dessert. I love watching it. Whereas Rian Johnson has made a meal, like there's steak on this plate, there's stuff to chew on. He wants you to look at your idols, look at the characters you love, and say, you have worshipped Luke Skywalker for 40 years. What if he lets you down?
Yeah.
And that is so
Our
much
heroes
more
are fallible.
Yes. That was the note HT gave me on when she read my first draft was, you should have a note about heroes being fallible, and I added that. So thank you, HT.
You're welcome.
Yeah, man. Again, this piece is really great, and I think everybody should read it. And I'm interested, Chris, I know in a recent episode of the podcast, I think you were talking about a news article that you wrote about how Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams came to the same conclusion about who Rey's parents were. And now I'm curious, after having seen the movie and after realizing that the answer is nobody, does that make a little bit more sense to you now?
It does. And I sort of laughed out loud when I saw the film and that was revealed. And I personally, I love that reveal because I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I was never really interested in who Rey's parents were. I thought that was like one of the most boring of all the mysteries, and I thought it was weird that people like harped on it so much. So I kind of love that he did that. That said, as much as I liked The Force Awakens, after seeing The Last Jedi, I'm actually kind of worried that J.J. Abrams is directing the next film, because this film, The Last Jedi, does such an interesting job of sort of destroying everything that J.J. Abrams set up. It feels kind of like reductive to just turn it back over to J.J. Abrams, because what's going to stop him from being like, all right, now I'm going to set all this stuff up again that Rian Johnson sort of tore down. So I'm a little worried about that now.
Yeah, I sort of had that same thought when I walked out of the theater, but I have to think that that Abrams would know that that would be a really bad look and would make him look like a less talented storyteller than I think he is if he were to just sort of impetuously retcon all of these decisions that Rian Johnson made. I think Jacob, you wrote an article today about what does the ending of The Last Jedi mean for the future of the trilogy, and I'll link that in the show notes as well. But I think something you said in there resonated with me, and that is I think J.J. Abrams is probably going to consider this a challenge, right? Like I hope that that's how he takes it. Do you think that he's going to be able to live up to that challenge without necessarily falling back on his old ways?
I'm really interested because J.J. Abrams is known for being a great collaborator. People love working with him, and I think Rian Johnson supplied answers and conclusions to a lot of J.J. Abrams' questions that maybe he wasn't expecting those questions to come so soon or to come this way. So I'm actually excited because I think J.J. Abrams is going to see that, whereas he ended Force Awakens on a very, very clear path with literally Rey holding out a lightsaber to Luke and saying, okay, what comes next? The next movie has to begin here. Johnson ends his movie with a new status quo, but with everything wide open. J.J. Abrams can pick up wherever he wants, immediately, 5 years later, 10 years later. All Rian Johnson did was completely reset the field in a way where J.J. Abrams and everybody else can come in and tell whatever story they want. Well, Last Jedi feels complete in a way that Force Awakens never did. So I think J.J. Abrams is being given a really interesting place to pick up, and I'm excited to see it. J.J. Abrams is a talented guy, so we'll see.
HT, what do you think?
I hope so too. I'm a huge fan of J.J. Abrams' work, and I think that he'll be able to take this as a challenge and sort of follow through with it. I do want to say, kind of didn't get to interrupt earlier, but I like how this film deconstructs that Chosen One mythology that has been so sort of central to the Star Wars franchise up until now, and kind of divvies up that power amongst the people. And I wonder if what J.J. Abrams can do with that. I'm really excited to see if he can pull off doing something about how power and hope lies within just the ordinary masses and the ordinary people, because it's not something that he's quite done before. He always kind of does films or television shows about exceptional people. The exception may be being lost, but it would be really interesting to see J.J. Abrams take that.
Yeah, for sure. And even Abrams himself, wasn't like super involved in Lost on a day-to-day level. I mean, he directed the pilot and he like executive produced the show, but yeah, that I don't even think that that was definitely like Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse's baby all the way through. So and that's an interesting point because this movie ends with a force-sensitive child who is like being oppressed. Looking out into the night sky and holding a broom and sweeping dust away, but looking up and being inspired. And I think there's a lot of potential there for exactly what you're talking about, HT. I really hope that Abrams is able to sort of pick up the ball and continue the story in a thematically interesting way that doesn't necessarily just reduce it back to the mystery box and all of that, now that Rian Johnson has sort of dropped a comical amount of dynamite in the mystery box and then just blown it to hell. So I don't want to, really belabor this conversation or sort of drag it out and try to compete with the Slash Filmcast, who just released their full review of The Last Jedi. So we're a shorter show. We're more sort of focused on news and the hard-hitting stuff of the day-to-day. So I think we should probably leave it there. I know we're going to be talking a lot more about this movie in the future, in the coming weeks. I will be gone next week, but I'm sure you guys are going to be chatting with Peter about it, who is not here and hasn't really had a chance to sort of voice his opinion on all this, because I know that the four of us, are more sort of in line, with our mentalities of this movie and our readings of it and sort of appreciation of it. I think Peter has a couple more issues than we do with it. So I'll be interested to hear how he brings those up over the next couple days. So stick with us, keep listening. You can find more about all of these stories we mentioned on today's show at slashfilm.com. Slashfilm Daily is published every weekday. And you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all of the popular podcast apps. We are still experimenting with the show, so if you have any questions or feedback or comments for the mailbag or anything like that, email us at peter@slashfilm.com. Please go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That actually helps us a lot, and be sure to spread the word to all your friends. If you enjoy what we're doing and you have any movie-loving friends who are looking for a good podcast, send us their way. That would be greatly appreciated. And I think that's going to wrap us up. So, HT, where can we find more of your work online?
You can find me at slashfilm.com. I'm on Twitter at HTranBui, and I have a podcast, the Millennial Falcon Podcast.
Chris,
on
how
iTunes.
about? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, Chris, how about you?
I'm also at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413.
And Jacob?
I am on slashfilm.com every single day, and I am on Twitter where I am at Jacob S. Hall.
All right, and you guys can find me on Twitter at Ben Pearson and at slashfilm.com as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.